Hi folks, Zach from pipebanddrummer.com here, and welcome back to Pipeband Drummer's YouTube channel. Today we are addressing a question by Richard, and thank you for that. Richard sent in a request for us to talk about changing a head and tuning a snare drum. So it just so happens that I have this snare drum, which was just a casualty from I think two Highland games ago. I haven't quite gotten to it yet, and we will talk about all the processes of taking the head off, what to do with the snares, putting a new head on. I've got to change the bottom head out as well, and put new bottom snares on. So we'll talk about all that. So what we have to do first is we have to lower the top snares, because we don't want any of the things that we're doing with the new top head or removing the old head or anything like that to interfere with the snares and cause them any damage. So what we'll do, we'll just go to the height side here, and we'll just take these snares all the way down, and you'll know when they're all the way down when you can't hear them rattling anymore. Just to get in there. Alright, that's as low as they can go. They are still a little bit rattly, just because I think that the head is touching them a little bit, so we'll have to be very careful when we take that head off. So to take the head off, we're just going to go around in a star pattern and just make sure these are all of the tuning rods are loose. And I'm not too picky about making sure that you do a quarter turn on each one when we're taking a head off, because we don't need to worry about the old head. It's already broken. We're not going to do it any more damage. So we want to make sure that all of these lugs are loose, and they pretty much are. Great. And they're all moving very easily. So now what I do is I just spin this and make sure that it comes completely out. And I just do the same thing for every lug. And maybe we'll fast forward this part because it's a little boring. So now that the head is loosened, all of the tuning rods have been loosened, I should be able to take that rim off. Oh, we got a couple that caught there. Okay. So you just simply remove the counter hoop here and place it on the floor. Now when you place it on the floor, just to make sure that none of the tuning rods pop out and spill over and get grease on your floor, give it a slight twist when you put it on the ground. All right. Also, I recommend putting some rags down or some newspaper or something if you have a carpet. I forgot to do this one time, and I still have a nice grease circle right down there from the greasy tuning rods here. So just place this on the floor, and then we'll talk about what to do with the head. So your next step is to remove the head. And you can save it and put it on your wall, or this one's pretty badly damaged. I would just throw it in the garbage. So we'll just put that down there. And then you see I have this little scrubby. This is one of these scrubbies that you can use on pots and it won't scratch anything. Just like a plastic sort of scrubby. And what I do is I just run it over the rim just to make sure there's no buildup or anything that's going to cause any damage to new heads. Yeah, that helps. Sometimes you get this funny buildup, you know, just dirt and grime that gets compressed into the head. And you don't want that sitting on your rim because it might cause damage to your new heads. All right. And you don't do this with a wet scrubby, obviously. It's very dry. And you can hear it's coming in contact with a little bit of buildup. You just want that all nice and smooth around here. There. Now at this time, when the snare head is off, you can use this time to just check and see if your snares are seated correctly on the snare bed, and to see if that little C shape is wrapped around the end of the snare bed. So you've got this little, the snares and the snare bed need to fit together, just like that. So you want to make sure that's nice and snug. Also, if you strum the side of each snare, you can hear on this snare that those two sides of the snare are both the same pitch. Now, if you had a snare that was a different pitch, let's say the snare was lower on the front and higher on the back, you could put a little metal shim. So shim is about a little thin piece of metal that you would put right in there, right between the C shape of the snare and that snare bed. So it would go right in there. And if you did that, that helps to bring the low pitch, the side that's low of the snare, that helps to bring it up in pitch a little bit. Sometimes if you put in the shim that's too thick, that can bring this up too high, and you just have to play with it a little bit. I've known people to use pop cans. I know Hugh Cameron sells shim kits that are truly excellent, and we've used those before. Very, very helpful. So check out check out your snares and strum your snares and see if everything's in pitch with where it's supposed to be. Also, while the head's off, this is a perfect opportunity to grab all your tuning rods and just clean them up a little bit. So what I normally use is Vaseline. You can use different types of grease. People have different preferences, but I have fine luck with Vaseline. And all you do, you just grab yourself a little bit and you just put it on your tuning rod like that, and then you just clean it up. Just rub back and forth, make sure that's all good. And there you go, brand new tuning rod. Now, you can also put a little bit of grease in each hole here where the tuning rod actually goes through, and we've done that. I don't do that with Vaseline. That's a different type of grease, and I'll have to talk to our sound guy to figure out exactly what that is. But you put a little bit in there, and it just makes everything move much easier, and it's much easier to tune, especially by feel, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So here is our new drum head. Our drum corps uses the Andante Cortec heads. They're really excellent. Their quality control is very good. And when I'm putting the head on, I like to make sure that it is right in between, that the label is right in between these two tension rods here. All right. Not everyone cares about that. I always like it to be directly across from me. I just find that the symmetry is nice. There's no structural reason for it at all, other than that all our drums look the same, and it just helps with the look of the drum corps. So now we have the top counter hoop back, and we're just going to put it right there perfectly. so that all of those holes are lined up, and just by hand, just twist all of your tuning rods and make sure that they've settled into their groove, make sure they're locked in. And also make sure that they're locked in the holes themselves. A couple times I have been on a head tightening spree and have not noticed until, oh, there's one. Have not noticed until I've tightened quite a bit that one of my tuning rods wasn't actually in the hole for it. And that is not a great situation to be in. So you learn from your mistakes, right? So you just make sure that all of those are in the hole. Okay. And now we're ready to grab the tuning key again and get to some serious work. So here's where the hard labor really begins. I like to start when I'm tightening with this particular tuning rod here, and then I go in a star pattern all the way around the drum to keep the tension even. All right. So what I do first off, I just turn this around just until it catches. And this would be what people call finger tight. All right. So you want to make sure all of these are finger tight, just to the point where the tuning key catches. There's that one. Almost done. Then after this first round, you'll find that because the head has come down a little bit, and that's what you call it as you're actually tightening the counter hoop is moving towards the shell. So it's moving down. We call that bringing the head down. So now when I go back to my first one, oh, it's loosened up a little bit. So I have to go around and do a couple more of these quick turns until the tuning rods catch. Okay, and it's still a little bit loose, so we're going to do one more of those. Oh, that one's already good. Okay. So now I'm starting to go, and once it catches, I'm giving it a little, about an eighth of a turn past where it catches. And this will start the process of the head coming down a little bit quicker. Now I say a little bit quicker, but this is a very long process. You can see the wrinkles are starting to come out of the head a little bit. And if you're like me, if you do this for a while, you can get lost in it a little bit, and you can forget where you ended up. That can be a little bit frustrating, but the feel of the tuning rods in the drum can tell you a lot. If one is really stuck and one is moving freely, as you go around, just tighten that one that's moving a little freer just a little bit more than the tight one. And after a bunch of turns going around the drum, the loose one will start to catch up to the tight one. My only advice is don't try to get back all that tension right away. So if you have one tuning rod that's very, very loose, don't just spend all the time on that and crank that 3 or 4 times. Just try to bring it back gradually. And you can hear the head start to make a little bit of noise now. And I'm going pretty consistently now, about 1/8 of a turn. And everything is feeling pretty similar. Oh, not that one. We'll have to pay attention to that and catch that up a little bit. Yeah, there was another loose one. So I just gave that a little extra. And I'm coming up to the other one that was a little bit loose. So just give that a little bit extra and try to catch that one up to the others. So we'll do one more, and then it'll be time to just let the head sit for a little bit, go grab some supper, and then we'll come back to it. The big thing about this is taking your time. All right? I've heard that this process from lots and lots of great players, this process should take a week, just the basic process of sort of bringing the head down correctly. Obviously, sometimes on games days, your head blows up and you need to replace it very quickly. That is the exception to the rule. But if you set them up quickly, or if you set them up right, sorry, if you don't set them up quickly, if you take your time, then the drum will have a lot better chance of surviving the entire season. So we're going to leave that for a little bit. I'll be back and we'll keep working on it. Alright, so we've gone around the drum. We've tightened all the tension rods until they have locked in, and then we've done a couple of 1/8 of a turns, gone around a few times. Let's do a pitch check to see where we're at. Well, we got a long way to go. So instead of torturing you with long shots of me going around and around the drum, doing my 1/8 of a turn, I've been doing that off camera, and we'll just do another little pitch check now, see where we're at. So getting a little bit better. So I'm continuing to go around, but now in much smaller increments. I'm just edging it forward, maybe a 1/16 of a turn each time I go around. And again, I'm just feeling for if some of them have, some of the tuning rods have a little bit of give. I'm just giving them a tiny little bit extra, just to catch them up to the other ones. So now I think it's time for some good old-fashioned super fast motion while I do the rest of this. Okay, so now we've got everything up to a pretty good tension. Feels pretty even to me. For those of you who are using the tuning blocks, like the Kilpatrick tuning block for the Premier 700s, that is a very good tool, and I've used it in the past just to make sure everything is even. You put your tuning block like right in here, right in this area, just to check and make sure that everything is at the right height all around. But I find what works best for me is just going by feel. So as I go around, we'll just do one round that's not in super fast motion here. Everything feels now about the same, which is a very good sign. Now, this type of thing does not work unless your tuning rods and lugs have been greased up. So if you're going to tune by feel, make sure that your drums are in very, very good working order. Yeah, everything feels pretty good. We're just going to leave that now. Whoa, there we go. We're just going to leave that now for a couple of hours, and we will, I'm sure we'll hear a couple little noises and cricks and cracks and blicks and blacks and all that stuff as the drum settles in. We'll just leave it alone for a while, we'll let it stretch, and then we'll come back to it later on. Just for a tuning check, we're getting there, all right? So we'll see how it goes in a couple hours, and we'll see you then. All right, as we're waiting for that top head to settle, I've heard it sort of crack a couple more times. Again, that sound is nothing to panic about. That's the glue stretching, breaking, and just the head sort of getting loosened up. You are going to get a few sounds from that, so no panic as far as that goes. Now, the bottom head here, we had a little incident at a games the other day where something, I can't remember what happened exactly on the drum, but we got a little kink in the snare wire, and this bottom head is acting a little funky too, so we're going to change that out. And what we're going to do first, we're just going to loosen the two snare mechanisms here, and we're going to take those snares off. And we'll get rid of those. And we're going to take the bottom head off. And again, same deal as the top head. It doesn't really matter which tuning rod you use. Just make sure that they're all loose. Oh, lovely sound of plastic stretching over the wood. And I'll keep removing this, and then I'll come back once it's off. We'll talk about what to do with putting the new bottom head on. Alright, so the head, I found out what was going on with it. There's a little dent in it, you can probably see there. So something must have just fallen accidentally against the bottom head. Try to protect your drum heads at all costs, because it means if something happens to it, your lead drummers have to change the heads and it makes them grumpy. So look after your drums. Anyways, we had a little mishap here, so we got to get rid of that. And I'll put this down on the ground, and then we'll talk about cleaning the little bearing edges up here. Alright, so we've got our new bottom head. We'll put that on just like that. And you want to make sure the head is seated correctly. And what that means is it's just make sure that it's sitting on the bearing edge, which is that wooden, the wooden edge of the shell. And you want to make sure it's sort of even all the way around, evenly seated. And next step, we're going to grab that rim, we're going to put that back on, and then we'll start tightening it up. Alright, we got the bottom rim here, and one super important thing to remember, seems like an easy thing to remember, but I have done this more than once. Make sure that the little area for the snare, right here, the snare bed, make sure that that is where it is supposed to be. Don't put it like this. I have done that again, Sometimes when you're doing 10 or 12 or 15 drums at the same time, you just stop paying attention as much as you should and you make that mistake. So make sure to not make that mistake. So we're going to try to get everything nicely lined up here and get all those tension rods in their holes where they should be. And then again, just finger tighten them a little bit. Make sure that they get in their little hole there all the way around, so that when you start using your drum key, you will be tightening a tuning rod that is in the hole as opposed to a tuning rod that is next to the hole, which is a real pain in the butt to undo. All right. I think those are all engaged pretty well. Oh. It's a sticky one there. All right, that's all good. Okay, so I'm going to go grab my drum key and then we're going to start the process of bringing this bottom head down a little bit too. Okay, so same process as with the top head. What we're going to do is we'll just start up here and just spin the drum key until it catches, and then we'll do that star pattern all the way around. Now, the bottom head is thinner, so it's not going to take nearly as much tension to bring this down to where it should be, to at least a good starting point. Remember that when you're preparing for competition season, you do not want to bring your drums to their peak tension in February. Very bad idea. You want to just sort of have pretty good sounding drums in February, okay sounding. Sometimes we've had bad sounding drums in February. Normally we change our heads February, March, and then we take a long time to bring them up to pitch over several months. Just every once in a while at practice, doing a little 1/16 of a turn, just tweaking them a little bit. And this will take a couple go-arounds too, I think, as well, to make sure that the head or the tuning rods just catch just like that. All right, so now you can see what I'm doing. These keys have the ability to have a lot of torque. If you are turning them right at the edges, you can get a lot of torque on these keys. But when I'm doing it very low, when the head's at very low tension, I'm just basically holding the key like this and turning like that, and that gives me a little better feel for where I'm at. If the key can't really turn that much when my two fingers are so close to the middle, then I know I'm pretty much where I want to be tension-wise. Yep, everything seems pretty even up to this point. Again, it's very easy to overthink tuning a snare drum. And while you want to follow the correct procedure, you really don't want to overthink things too much. If heads are even and tensioned correctly, and snares are in good working order and leveled up nicely against the head, then everything should work fine. And we're getting close. I think one more turn around and we should be pretty much there. Then we'll just let this bottom head stretch a little bit. I'm just going to go around the circle here. Alright, so there's still a couple wrinkles in the head. It hasn't come down all the way, but I'm just going to let that stretch a little bit. And we'll go back to the top head because it's had some time to stretch out. Alright, we're back with the top head now, and the top head is, if you listen to the pitch of it here, we're getting there. You can tell we're getting there. The pitch that you're looking for, if there is a little bit of a ping off the top head, that is the pitch that you're looking for. Alright, so right now we get kind of this, there's no ping at all. Alright, you don't hear that. So we're going to go around a couple more times here. And then we'll see where we're at. Again, I'm going in very small increments. We'll check it. A little better. A little better pitch. We'll go once more. And then we'll stop and let it stretch a little bit. Again, getting there, you can see the pitch coming up each time. We'll leave it for a little bit, and then we'll come back and crank it up a little bit more. Okay, so off camera, I did a couple more times through that. A couple more times going around, little 1/16ths of a turn, and now you can hear there's a little tiny ring coming off that. Now ideally you'd want a little bit more than this. I don't want to give this drum too much tension because I don't want the head to explode before our next competition. But you can just hear a couple of those little high overtones on it. So what we're going to do, we're going to turn the snares back on. And let's see what we're working with here. You hear the heads coming up. You hear a little rattle there too. I'm not going to panic too much over that, but that could be something in the snare tension that I need to work on. So we'll see if we can make that go away here. Now I've just switched over to the snare tension side. There we go. You can still hear that little rattle, but in the next couple of weeks, we'll continue to be bringing that head down. And of course, as you bring the head down, because it's changing height, you're going to have to change the height of your snare. It helps to reset the snare, meaning lower it down until it stops touching the top head, and then bring it back up again until you get the sound that you like. And that's pretty much the rule. When you get the sound that you like, stop. And just go with that. Alright? So there's the top head. We're going to turn over the drum and just talk about the bottom head and put those snares back on, and then we should be all good and ready to go. Okay, back to the bottom head we go. And we have this nice set of snares here, brand new snares. We're going to put on, you can see the Premier brand. The Premier brand faces up so that you can see it. So I put these on like this. Oh, and actually, before I put this on, I was going to mention there is no point in putting new snares on until the rim, or the bearing edge here, is higher than the snare bed. If the snare bed is higher, you're going to have a heck of a time getting any sort of snare action. So make sure you bring the head down enough so that the bearing edge here is a little bit higher. And that's what I did again off camera. The head's had some time to stretch. So now, to get that at the right tension, usually you can just use your fingers and eyeball it. And you want to make sure that, you know, the snare is at the same position on the rim here, and the same position on the rim here. And let's see what we... Oh yeah, all right, we're getting a little bit of snare action. Now, this may be a little bit too far away, but if you tap the one side of the snare here, very close to the bearing edge, that is not exactly what you want. You don't want a lot of sound here. So that's a little bit better. You hear what I did there? I just hit this little adjuster, or I just turned this little adjuster here. And that brought the snare down so it's sitting flush with the head. All right. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. There, that noise went away. Just for comparison's sake, here's what you don't want. This is if the snare is too high off the head. All right. Now, as I turn that adjuster and I bring this side of the snare down so it's flush with the head, that noise goes away. All right, you try to eyeball it, make sure it's flat. It looks flat there, and it looks pretty flat there. Okay, so do the same thing on this side. Now that looks almost like it's a little too low, so I'm going to bring those both up and reset them. I'm going to bring both sides off the head a little bit. All right, so we start to tap. You hear that tappy sound. There, it starts to disappear. Okay, we'll do the same thing here. There we go. All right. Really, the snares are only finger tight. You want your snares to sound very, very loose. If you want to get some snares, sorry, you don't want them to sound loose, you want them to be loose. Then you'll get a lot of nice snare projection off the back. If your snares are too tight, they'll choke up and you won't get any snare action off the back. And if you're in a competing pipe band, you'll know that comments from the judges are always talking about lack of snare off the back. So, snares nice and loose, really nice and loose there. You should be able to tap very lightly on both sides of the snare. And if you get any snare action when you tap very lightly, you know that you're in the ballpark. If your snares are too tight, no snare action at all. Okay, so we're going to loosen that off quite a bit. We don't want them floppy. We don't want them falling off. Right to that point there. Now we're going to turn it back around, turn the drum back around, see what the whole thing sounds like, and we're almost done. All right, we're on the home stretch here. I just went and did like another 16th of a turn around the drum. Let's bring the snares up and see what we've got. All right, you hear the snares kicking in there. Alright, not a bad spot to get to. We'll be messing with it in the next couple weeks before we get to our competition. Thank goodness I have a guy in my corps who's great for helping me out with sound. I obviously make that suggestion to all lead drummers to have a sound tech that will help you with this stuff. And while you're rehearsing, he or she can be replacing heads and working on sound. Is super, super helpful. Anyway, I hope this video has been helpful. How to take an old head off, put a new one on, how to replace a bottom head, how to replace bottom snares as well, and get a half decent sound that you can live with. So until next time, happy drumming.